Hello and welcome to the art and craft of illustration. Whether you read comics or picture books, play video or board games, or simply watch TV, you're surrounded by the work of professional illustrators and artists. Our panel panel of artists today will discuss what goes into the art that wraps around every storytelling experience you have, as well as a variety of jobs which have influenced their styles and careers. Let's start with to my right. There's Oisín McGann. Do you want to tell people about yourself?
Well, I've been an illustrator, commercial artist since the 90s, and I've worked in a whole range of areas such as animation and advertising. Mostly, I illustrate books, and but I mean, over my career, basically, my principle was I would draw or paint anything for money. And now I divide my time between writing books and illustrating them and doing the odd art commission here and there. But yeah, so book illustration is my main thing, but I've drawn and painted on anything that stood still at some point or other.
I feel that's going to be a common refrain amongst us all. So below me, Bevan. Sarah Bevan. Tell people about yourself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bevan. Been illustrating for a few years, now 5 years now, because I realized I really hated my job and I couldn't just walk out of it into another one. So focused on what do I love, what do I keep coming back to, which is illustration. And in the past 5 years, I've managed to do logo work, join comic classes, do work for First Fortnight and Alvarado Therapy Clinic. I've been very lucky to work with such wonderful people. You also get the odd scumbag, but you get over it. And most of my work revolves around either wildlife, nature, inclusion, and just a whole lot of positivity, because the world can be miserable enough and I don't want to be adding to that. I want to make people feel safe and secure and bring a little joy at my art. I haven't done nearly as much as some of the panelists and moderators in this table, but everyone's on a different journey and we don't approve in a vacuum. So please God, I get where you are someday. And I look forward to the journey in the meantime.
Yeah, it's so important not to look at your own art and go, oh, my art is not that compared to the other person's art, because I wanted to be a comic book artist so much when I was a teenager, and then I read the work the Akira by Itomo, and I didn't know that he had a team of illustrators doing all his backgrounds. I just thought, oh, one person did this many pages in a month of being a comic artist.
Yeah, so when you have an artist who's thanking his staff, you have to say, all right, okay, I didn't really.
Yep, that's the trick. So lastly, we have the gestalt made up of images, which is Leeann Hamilton. Tell people about yourself, Leeann.
Okay, I am definitely this mess of images. Okay, I'm Leeann. I am based in County Meath because I can't get out of here. I've worked on comics. I've worked on at least one animated show, like almost a decade ago. I've worked in video games, and recently I've been spotlighting as a freelance illustrator. I've worked on podcast covers for a video game review site called Retronauts. Oh, yeah. And some of my work is on the podcast features. And some other recent projects I've been working on is basically mostly private commissions, but I'm also like...
We're back live on Twitch.
Yes, you
are. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry for technical difficulties. Part of our team was hit by an asteroid. Leeann, you were in the middle of coming to the end, I think, of telling us about your illustrative career.
All right, sorry. I have a comic on irishcomics.ie called Triassic Field. It's updated every Monday. Mm-hmm. It'll explain itself once you read it. I'm not going to spoil it. Anyway, that's it. That's me for this evening.
I remember being actively annoyed I couldn't give you money for the Countess Markovich comic, because I really loved I loved what you did with it, but because it was already paid for by the Northern Ireland people, you were just handing them out.
Yeah, it was free. Like, it was a sort of an educational thing, so it was free. It was handed out. You can get it for free as a PDF on their site as well. So, you know,
if we have
sponsor me through coffee if you like.
If we have links to anything, if we have links to anything you want to share, then join us on Discord for and share those links in the chat over there after the panel, so we can all swap the artwork and so forth. Because there's a lot of really cool stuff being done. So getting on with the actual panel. So how has it been to watch the world go mad adopting the lifestyle of an illustrator?
Yeah, it's been highly ironic because when I started publishing books, one of the things I kind of comforted myself with was the idea that I could now just stay at home and work. And actually, I do so much promotion work for the books that I end up driving around the country all the time. So when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, I had to stay at home. And I had kind of been looking for an excuse to do that, as it turned out. So it was odd because a lot of people aren't used to the idea of being at home and kind of motivating yourself to get up every day and without having somebody to kind of check in with or have to be responsible to. So in some ways, like as disasters go, it's kind of fitted in with my lifestyle fairly well. But at the same time, you also have your family home, the kids home, it's what's been interesting is kind of learning the whole video side of things. We're actually going to have a talk on how pandemic and tomorrow on how the pandemic affects creativity. But it's been interesting to watch. Like it's having to stay home and work at home. I suppose if you work at home, and you're fortunate in that this is kind of fitted in with your lifestyle anyway. I've been trying to see the best of it, to be honest.
I remember early on, yourself and myself had an exchange over Twitter where we said that are they all going mad because they're now living like illustrators? It's like people complaining about they can't remember where their shoes are because they haven't left the house in so long. It's like that's how I
realized recently I haven't bought a pair of trousers in about a year and a half. I'd still wear them, but it's just like my demands are fewer. So
I've had to. So Sarah, has the pandemic changed how you approach your work, or have you had to change your work because of it?
Initially, most of my outward success, if we're talking monetary and getting people talking to me and stuff like that, was at cons. And most of my feedback, I go to cons, go to Comic Cons and walk up to some of the people who had panels and went, here's my portfolio, please look. And most of the feedback was lovely, just like, it's cute, but it's not comics. Figure out where you want to go. But also my tables did pretty well. Like at WizardCon, I would do pretty well. Decaf, I love that one. DCC, and all of those stopped. So I was like, cool, there's my major source of income. And then I also got kicked out of my job and they haven't even contacted me since. So so I had to really focus on how to promote my Etsy store and how to build that sustainably. Personal private commissions, and then luckily people knew people who needed artwork, and it wasn't like a little bit was I was privileged and I was getting favors of, hey, I know a girl who does this, talk to her. But it was more because I was churning out my own art. I wasn't doing it for anybody else. I was just doing it because one that got me quite a bit of work was a cactus with a mask over his mouth, saying don't be a prick, wear a mask.
Great.
And while that print hasn't sold a lot, it has got a lot of people going, hey, I need a cactus drawn. While you're here, can you draw this? While you're here, can you draw that? And you're like, that's 3 damn commissions from something I just farted out of my brain because it made me giggle. And what you have to do to make people see you is just keep putting out your own stuff. And if somebody doesn't like it, it's up to them to waste their time and tell you. And you go, okay, make your own. Just keep motivating yourself, as Oisín, yes, yeah. Oisín said, was the tricky part. Some weeks picking up that pencil was the hardest thing in the world to just sit down and do. And then other weeks I had 200 ideas and my problem was narrowing it down to one and actually finishing that project. But it's had its ups and downs, and I'm really looking forward to the conventions being open again, because now I'm just like, hello, witness my new table. Look at all this art I did to stop myself going insane.
We've done our best to try and replicate that convention, the convention table experience.
It is
on
one
Discord.
Of the best ones, the best online ones I've been on anyway. There's so much going on that even if you're not at the table or this talk, you're able to float around and talk to people who are also interested in XYZ. And then when the cons open, you're like, yes, I know where my people are. Let me go find them.
But our dealers rep actually worked very, very hard to make sure that there was good connection, and we got anybody who gave us art before the convention. I made them all into adverts that run before all the panels, because that's the language of conventions converted to the language of television. Is that when you walk through a convention, you see tables, but when you're watching TV, you see adverts.
Yeah.
So we know it's not a substitution for actually having the table in front of you and how people will pick up 3-4 things at a time. But you know, we're all doing our best with the situation that's apparent. So Leeann,
you guys are doing an amazing job.
That's very kind of you to say.
Thank you so much for all the work and the opportunity you've provided for so many of us.
It's a big team, and they all work very hard. And we're very grateful for that. Thank you. So Leeann, how has the pandemic changed things for you? Like you've had a very varied career, going from self-published to working for other people to video games to development work to well, with your own comics all along the way. How have you found? Has the pandemic changed things for you?
The pandemic just feels like Wednesday. Like literally nothing has changed for me.
Right.
I do feel moments of cabin fever where I'm like, Jesus, I just want to go to a different town. I just want to see new stuff but other than that, like I have never seen myself rely on the internet so much in terms of shopping and everything and getting art supplies in just to mess around with. But no, I think what last year kind of let me the opportunity was I was already studying culinary arts in college. So I kind of had half a full year within in the classrooms. But then all of a sudden we were all working from home, and that was kind of the case up until May or June. We were also doing exams online and everything. So that was the only significant change I seem to have felt, really. But other than that, like I was kind of getting a bit, like I said, I felt a bit cabin feverish. Like there's some people I haven't seen in years practically because of this pandemic. And but yeah, like I'm just kind of hoping it's over soon, basically. But I think what's also offered as well is a lot of people kind of like actually staying at home and realizing that work is crap, and that going to commute out to Dublin or whatever major city to work in is also crap. Because I had to put up with a lot of that myself, like especially when I went to college in my earlier years, and just like dealing with transport and dealing with other people in a room and then dealing with more hours of transport on the way home, like it just really ran me health down for a long time. And especially like doing work that could have been done at home, for example. Like I know that people are like, well, why couldn't you work at home before? Well, it's like the internet is not the same as it is now as it was in 2004 or 2005. It was basically still in its primitive form. YouTube wasn't a thing yet, but nowadays it's like I have the time now to actually sit down and refine my style, actually do a bit of practice, get more, find online more so. I've actually been trying to use Blender as well, for real, and there's so many tutorials and resources online, it's ridiculous. Like I'm actually getting used to 3D modeling and stuff. Anyway, sorry for waffling. It's just that I'm so used to working from home for so long. It's a kind of a nothing situation for me. Although like I still go out and wear the mask and stuff like that. But like other than that, like what can you do? You just want to get everyone kind of vaccinated by Halloween and make sure everyone is safe and okay, you know? Indeed.
The thing I found I really missed was actually client meetings. Because it used to be when I was in my 20s, I would you'd know I was running out of money because my hair would be short, because that's when I would go around to look for client meetings. I'd look all respectable in a nice fresh shirt, and I just get shabbier and shabbier the wealthier I was. So when it's the mental health aspects of it. Okay, what's on the mask, Sarah?
Oh, don't be a prick.
Don't be.
Yay.
Lovely.
There it is.
Sorry, it was when you mentioned masks. I was like, duh.
The mental health aspects of working for yourself are not something I think are talked about enough. About how like it's good to have indicators of when you need help or when you're falling behind. Or how do you track your own work, or do you have ideas of when you're or is it just like the incoming balance that you're looking at in terms of I'm not doing enough, or I'm doing too much at the moment? I think Oisín, you're probably the most experienced in this amongst us.
Well, I suppose it's dependent on where I was in my career. My stress levels are directly connected to my income. I can feel my stress levels rising as my bank balance drops. So, and also one of the things about being freelance is that because you never have security unless you're wealthy, basically. So there's always that sense of insecurity, and I think any freelancer can relate to that. That idea of, all right, I've got enough work now, but what about 3 months' time or 6 months' time? So I have no idea what I'll earn next year, and that's the same every year. So I have at this point I have enough contacts and enough different projects going on at any given time that I'm reasonably certain of where I'm going to be, but it changes a lot. And the other thing is, are you doing enough of the work that satisfies you, that kind of fulfills your goals? Because that's an entirely different thing. And sometimes the stuff that pays, quite often the stuff that pays isn't exactly the stuff you want to do. Or sometimes you've got very set ideas about what you want to do, but you can't find ways to get paid for it. So like at this stage, I'm pretty, I've got a decent balance of both. But it's always there. You're always thinking, well, actually, so for instance, when I'm working on a painted fantasy piece, which I haven't done in ages, really, and I want to do more. So I kind of think, right, I need to start doing those kind of commissions again. Because quite often the art that I do for books, I work in a lot of different styles, which is something that you kind of end up doing in Ireland because there's rarely one area of work that gives you enough income, unless you're working for clients in the UK or the US. And I kind of like working in different styles, but it also means that I don't get to do enough of that kind of fully painted stuff, for instance. So it's getting that balance right. And I think artists generally, my dad actually did he was a psychologist. He did his PhD on creative behavior. And I remember reading one of the books he'd used for his research. And one of the things was that artists actually have higher than average levels of good mental health. But it's connected to their productivity. So it's not necessarily how much work you're doing, but how you're doing the work. Are you being fulfilled by it? And as any artist, I'm sure will know, it's great therapy. It's kind of, to be working and to be using your imagination and your creativity is really good for your head. But we do get into this weird job that is by its nature unstable. And then we try and kind of make a living from it, which isn't always the most realistic aspiration.
It's a creative profession, and the best phrase I've ever heard for this is that you're never guaranteed income in a creative profession.
Yeah.
No one promised you an income when you came into a creative profession.
No. So writing is kind of works differently to illustration. Illustration can still be treated as a trade. You can charge by the hour, and that was the most valuable piece of advice I got early in my career: is know how much time is worth, and be straight about it. And then being brave about actually charging enough. But yeah, so I think any illustrator needs to kind of balance the earning with the type of work they really want to do, because you're very much your career is steered by the jobs you've done. So you can end up doing stuff you don't particularly like, or that isn't kind of satisfying because of the work you've done before for money. And I think that can be one of the biggest challenges, is to kind of keep your career going in the right direction, while still earning enough to make a living from it.
Actually, just on that, Leeann or Sarah, do either of you have an experience where you had to know when you had to leave a job, when
Yes.
that was your creative hit. All right, so yeah, Sarah, please.
I was doing a logo for an energy company. They're a natural energy company. I can't even remember what their name was.
Property better, you're not specific.
Yeah, no, but it was. I remember it was a natural energy company,
right?
And they were asking about logo, and I was working with one guy and kind of giving him back and forth, and I was like, we were using the emails as a contract, so like it will be this rate for this long for this, and technically it's in writing, so neither of us can renege on it. And the guy I was dealing with was like, yes, here's the feedback, do this. And then he got fired. And the guy who took over for him was like, I never agreed to this with you, so we're not paying you. And I'm like, hold up, your company email is what made the agreement with me. And you are still part of your company. It wasn't this man who works there who made the agreement. It was that specific company. Try again. And he was like, you don't need to get so rude. I'm like, your literal opening correspondence with me was, I'm not paying you. And then he was like, kept being like, you don't need to be so rude. You don't need to be so aggro. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, cool. I see on this chain of emails, there's a guy who is above you. I'm going to message him directly. Then he started being very polite. But mainly once I got the other guy in, he was like, what? Just pay her the money. Like, okay, look, can we get the rights to what you've done so far? So we can give it to another artist, because you're going in a direction we don't like. And I'm like, that's fair. Give me the money. I'll give you everything I've done so far. Cut my losses. All of that IP energy is yours. I don't know what they've done with it, and I don't care. It wasn't work I desperately wanted to do anyway, so it was easier for me to walk away from it. Had this been something I was directly invested in, like a zine educating people on local birds to see, I would have been heartbroken. But it's a logo. I have done several since, and anybody I've done them for since have been delighted with my work and been like, cool, we're going to poke you again in the future. A friend of mine setting up something similar. I'm like, yes, please, because that's how most of my money happens. But you got to know your rights, and you have to fight your corner, because you don't have a boss you can poke and go fight for me. And I'm sure Leeann probably has dealt with this of, if you're a woman, they will take you less seriously. And they will take any hold up, no, I know my rights. They will go straight, like, look, Scarlett Johansson is one of the top best paid actresses in the world, and she still had to fight for her contractual rights with Disney of all. That last part doesn't surprise me, but even she has to fight for this. Did you hear any stories about Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., or any of them having to fight for their money?
Only story I heard about Robert Downey Jr. is that he had them over a barrel.
Yeah,
like that's the only story you heard out of that.
So
it is. If there's one thing I would recommend to people, it's there's a wonderful little speech called well, I can't say, because it's an all ages panel. I can't say the full title, but you can guess what it is if I say "F you pay me." It's a wonderful little speech given by a graphic designer. If you look it up on YouTube, I'm sure you'll find it. But it brings you back to the core principle of, my time is worth something, and you need to understand.
That was a writer, wasn't it? Was it Harlan Ellison?
No. I'm sure Harlan Ellison has expressed a similar principle. But I remember seeing it as a speech from graphic designer around 2010. It was doing the rounds amongst my friends anyway. So changing from job to job, Leeann, how have you found adapting to new areas? Because you've gone from video games. Like how was that? Was there much of a culture shock when you're moving from one endpoint to another endpoint?
Just say no. Because first of all, I really do enjoy video games, and they're actually one of my more earlier influences on my art style. I know that sounds very trashy to hear about it nowadays, but like back then, I loved my Mega Drive, I loved my PlayStation, and certain video games have absolutely changed me for on the permanent basis. But
it's all culture. It's all culture, so it's all good.
It is all culture, and comics were just one of those ways that I just kind of learned how to draw on my own sort of initiative. just by reading comics. I could draw my own comics. I've been drawing comics since I was 8. So, but not like, professionally, but they were sort of both hobbies that I could always enjoy.
Was it difficult turning that into a job, actually?
Implying I have a job. No, the thing is, like,
well, let's say turning that into a career where you got money from clients.
implying career, implying money. Sorry, I keep going. But no, most of my career is basically gaps, and kind of I get a lot of people approaching me saying, "Oh yeah, I have an idea for a game or an idea for a movie. I'd like this drawn up, and hopefully we'll get it pitched and made." And I'm like, sure, but I find that the work I do on sort of a like, I don't mean for free or for exposure. They're usually the projects that never get made. So it's like I've never gotten my career sort of pushed forward on that basis. So I always tell people never work for free, because if the producer's not paying you, he's obviously going to hand out cash towards other aspects of his project, like promotion or paying himself or paying his other staff or whatever.
You're the first impression. Your art will be the first impression that the project makes, and if he's not going to pay for that, he's definitely not going to pay for quality anywhere else. That's at least been my experience. I've done stuff for friends once I've known them well, but I wouldn't actually take anything from someone who's looking to pay me an exposure, because I take great pleasure when anyone says the word exposure to me and say, "Wait, that thing people die of."
Exposure kills people.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob Hoyne.
Yes.
There's also indecent exposure, but like, again, this is the daytime panel. But then there's also that you sort of need a vocational role, in that you need to apply for roles and jobs and stuff like that. And it's just,
that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. And it's like, again, it's just you see all these certain places in Ireland that do list job openings for certain creative roles, and you send on your portfolio and you hear nothing. Also, I think it could be just a case that they could be hiring in-house anyway, because they have all that staff experience to kind of slide into this other role of I won't specify, but it's like, you already have the staff doing that kind of work there. They might as well just slide into this next sort of job listing, and you're just listing it there for the crack. So
legally, they have to list it that they're at least attempting to apply out of house for a position.
And you're fighting that internal promotion. The trick is to never let the rejections get on top of you. Let them be the bricks in the road to your success. Because I think it was Michael Carroll who asked somebody once. So he was asking who wanted to be a writer. So how many rejection letters have you gotten? It's like, well, I haven't gotten any. And it's like, well, you're not going to be a writer at this rate.
The publisher is not going to break into your house and hand you a contract.
Yes, they're not going to find you.
Mr. Right.
Yeah.
Can I actually respond with the hobby into, like, I'm still at the hobby stage because this isn't a sustainable income for me. So ideally, I'll get a job 2-3 days a week in somewhere like Designist or Tiger or Sustern Green, where you'll be inspired by the patterns, the different cards, everything. But one thing that really helped me get some sort of sustainable income is the many table legs theory, that you're propping up your table with maybe like an octopus with 8 table legs instead of 4. And that way, if 1 or 2 of them get knocked over, your table's still standing. So for myself, it's specific private commissions, tables at cons, virtual or in real life, an online shop. Mine is currently Etsy, but I'm debating whether or not to turn my website into my online shop, because Etsy keeps changing their rules. Online directories. There's quite a few of them out there that are quite handy. One great one was Just by Irish. They're no longer accepting new applications, but like there's a few of them out there and they're worth looking for, especially coming up to Christmas, because I got quite a few eyeballs because of them. And competitions, you won't know you're standing in the real world, let's say, of illustration, unless you applied for a few competitions. And even if you get told, oh, you're shortlisted, you didn't make it, you're like, but I was shortlisted. That means somebody saw me. that's feedback, and I can
it's also a
do
sentence you
something
can
with
add
that.
to your. It's also a sentence you can add to your bio. Shortlisted at
Exactly.
winner of.
Yeah. So, but there's quite a few things. There's also Jam Art Factory, Irish design shops. Get yourself some cojones, whether they're borrowed, mental. You buy them in a shop and they're your little stress ball.
Store bought will do if you can't grow your own.
Store bought will do if you cannot grow your own.
Yeah.
We have no judgment against gender. But like, walk in and ask. The worst they can say is no, or your stuff's not quite what we sell. Then you figure out the problem there is, what do they sell? Do I do it? Am I working away from what I want to do to try and fit in here? Is this the right place for me? And you figure out that. Like, I would personally love to be in Jam Art Factory, because every time I go in there, it's like being in a gallery, and it's beautiful and it's full of Irish art. Like, I discovered Rob Steers and Maxi there, and those are some incredible artists, and there's way more in there. And I'm like, how do I get in there? I know my stuff's not Maxi level, but like, that's because he's incredible. I can accept that. But my stuff is like Rob Steers level, because this stuff is cute and it's funny and it's relatable and it's approachable. Now, he is a better artist than me, and I'm not shooting myself in the foot here. He's just a great artist, and he captures, like Twisted Doodles. She doesn't have to be doing amazing, detailed graphical art, but you look at that and you're like, I'd buy that book. That's funny. I know a single mom who, or like not a single mom, but like I know moms who'd love her book that came out about being a new parent. I know science geeks who would love her posters for Christmas. You just got to figure out where you would fit in, and if you don't fit in yet, find out why.
The hunting the money aspect for it is always tricky. Sorry, Oisín, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I back it up. I mean, things have changed actually quite a bit since I got started. Not that I'm kind of some old kind of fart, but I'm starting to feel it some days. But when I started, I came out of college, I dropped out of college. So I'm an art college dropout. That's like a low start.
I failed leaving Cert Art. I failed leaving Cert Art.
Thankfully, in art, nobody cares what qualifications you have. If it's not in the portfolio, it doesn't count. So, but I came out when I was, I wanted to be a comic artist. That was my first goal. But I also wanted to write books, and I wanted to publish all sorts of things. But I did anything that paid, and so I wasn't kidding when I said I painted on all sorts of stuff: bike helmets, bike boots, motorbikes, fuel tanks, the bonnet or back of a car, murals, paintings on commission. I did corporate Christmas cards, like literally anything, and in any style that I could to get money. And all of those things contributed to. Some of them felt like I was being distracted away from stuff. And then eventually I pitched 2080 a couple of times. I didn't get any work out of it. But by that point, I was starting to shift more towards books. And then I ended up as a background designer in an animation company. And I ended up as an art director, moved to London as an art director in an advertising agency. And I did nearly a year as a security guard in London, and was doing cartoons for a newspaper until I became an art director in an advertising agency. So, I mean, you end up with a really colorful CV doing this stuff. And it also prepares you for never having a proper job again. Because, you get past the point where you go, right now I'm kind of heading towards 30, whatever, going like, who the hell's going to employ me now for anything other than the stuff that I've done? So nowadays,
I sat in my room and draw is not really a great CV. So.
Having the versatility for maybe being able to move from one job to another is going to help a lot. But it also means I don't have a recognizable style. I'm going to give you an example. So these are two books I've done within the same year. If I can find a cartoon in it, hang on. Yeah, so
thank you.
That's one of the most recent books. And then this is within the same year. I had to do this. So, but I mean, what came out of that was an ability to do different styles for different types of stories. But it does mean that you have to hustle. You have to hustle because nobody's going to do it for you. I mean, eventually you might get an agent, but I've never had an illustration agent. I have one for the books, I have one for the writing. But agents are hard to get, and certainly by the time you get one, you're probably going to be able to hustle anyway, because you'll have developed the experience that they're looking for when they look for an artist. So, I mean, I hate to say it because I know really good artists who've never made it because they didn't put themselves out there. And persistence and the ability, a certain kind of amount of entrepreneurship is necessary for the job. Unless you want to work in animation where there's employment. There used to be illustration studios, but there aren't really anymore. I spent some time in one, but we were all self-employed. We weren't kind of hired. And that was useful. But I started off when stock photography was starting to take over from illustration. And stock photography killed the illustration trade. I mean, there's so much work was lost because stuff people used to get illustrated, they would use, stock photo of somebody sitting by a computer.
Editorials coming back.
So
editorial work is coming
editorial,
back. Thank you. Stock styles like now.
Yeah, per illustration now, it doesn't pay as much as it used to because like a single illustration for a magazine used to be one of the best kind of paid jobs. But there's a lot more out there, and people, because everything's visual now, everything's on the web, people need images, and obviously they use photography a lot, but there's still loads of different opportunities now. It's weird as well because a lot of it's so online, you don't talk to people anymore. But even things like getting paid, like back when you had to get paid by checks, there were times I literally had to walk into the office and say, "I'm not leaving until you give me my check," which is harder to do over email.
I've done that a few times myself. Yeah.
So can I just say, when everyone was being like, "Oh, I dropped out of college" or "I failed out of college," I do have a master's degree in creative digital media. But I was told in my exit interview, don't go into design. You're not very good at it. To which the lecturer who had said that to me was informed by the other lecturer, she has a job and it's in design, like her first job out of college. I walked out on a Monday and by Wednesday, I was designing logos for an accounting firm. I had a design lecturer in that course who... She is a published illustrator now, and she's doing amazing. I'm not going to say her name, but she did turn around and say to me, "Your work is insipid." And at the time, she was right.
The nicest thing the nicest slam I ever got was, "You're very good at working from the inside of a design," which was it was a phrase said to me. It was a phrase said to me by very, very lovely designer Brendan Donlan, Design Tactics. So I was lent out to them for about 2-week period from another studio, and basically what he was saying was, "You can imitate a style, but you have no ability to generate art on your own, do you?" And it's like, yep, that was actually really accurate when I was 19.
Also, by the
because
way,
I'd not worked enough. I just not worked enough.
There is a career for that. It's called character design, where you have two types. One is Blue Sky, who can come up with 700 ship designs. And then you have the second guy who they take that first sketch and go, "That's beautiful. I'm going to detail that. I'm going to add shading and color." And that's where your skill set sounded like it was at the time.
Well, yeah. I was just a guy with a copy of Paint Shop Pro that I bought for 50 quid because that's how I went to legitimate.
No training in Paint Shop. That's how I learned how to digitally paint, and that was a long time ago.
Oh, buying Paint Shop was how I went legitimate with my tools. I currently tithe my wealth to Adobe every month now. Even though I'm still looking at the free alternatives just to see if they get to a stage where I maybe could let go of.
Please just buy CSP because it goes as low as $25 for a license, and you get a ton of stuff. It is strictly for illustration and comics. It is wonderful. I recommend it. Sorry, go on ahead.
Oh, great recommendation. Oisín, you were saying.
I gave up on Photoshop. I've switched over to Krita now, and everything I do now is in Krita.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was using such an old version of Photoshop anyway, because I couldn't, like ages ago, I couldn't afford to kind of upgrade. And I was still mostly painting stuff on the table, and then tweaking. So I wasn't using Photoshop for painting. And then when I started, I just didn't want to subscribe to stuff because my computers last a long time. Like the last two computers, I'm on my third Mac, and I've been working since first Mac was in 2001. 2001. So 20 years. So I'm now on my third Mac. My last two have lasted me nearly 10 years each. So and there's no need, like you just look after them and kind of, but the problem is when the software upgrades, at some point they say, no, you can no longer use this operating system. So And so that means that once you start subscribing, they start deciding which operating system you can use and which, you know, so, and I even had to upgrade to get Crit. So, but I just thought, no, because there's a point where like the technology starts dragging you with it and you kind of go, but I've got my system. I know what works and I know what's reliable, you know. So yeah, so I use Krita now. It's free and it's as good, certainly as good as much better than the Photoshop I originally used.
Two points
and
on.
mind you, the typing on it isn't great, but still. Yeah. But I'm a painter, so I can work around that. You know, that's one of the things about being an illustrator. You're not relying on graphic design tools.
I do more work in typography than I do anything else. So I was just so broken when I tried to lay out text in Krita. Two things on the technology not being with you. My PC is like got 16 gigs of RAM, and this was bought like 8 years ago now. So it was a really good PC for video and for rendering. And I got myself a lovely big XP Pen tablet, and I was sitting down ready to use this Photoshop tool they have for artists to draw with, and PC is just a shade below. My graphics card is just a shade below their illustration software.
Oh, no.
So I can't paint using the software I pay. I'm DX11. Sorry, I'm DX11.5, and it needs to be 0.6. It's like 0.5, 0.6. It's kind of crazy how small the thing is, but I fell below it and I missed it. But to further your point, when I was in 2001, I was working for a very lovely gentleman named Pat McIntyre. If you're in the industry, you might have heard the name. Who had a creative pre-press. They did everything that came out of Diageo, so everything Burger King, everything Guinness's, Cadbury, Dublin bus livery. Pat actually drew out the Dublin bus liveries by marker on board.
Do you know who else actually got started in Dublin bus?
Back in the 90s. Sorry, I cut over you. Sarah, what did you say?
Sorry, you know who else got a start in doing art for Dublin bus? That's a huge name now.
Who?
Peter Donnelly.
Really?
I recognized his art on Dublin bus before, and I was like, hang on, there's no name whatsoever. I'm just like, they look real familiar. Click. And I went up to his Twitter and I was, is this you? And he's like, ha, someone found me. And his art's still on buses to this day. And it's just like, oh, that's amazing. It's amazing just seeing somebody go from,
Sorry, Oisín, you were saying?
Is that Peter Donnelly who does picture books?
Yes.
Or is there a different? Right. All right. Okay.
And he also does
because there was a guy
for Kyo's. He does a lot of like branding stuff as well. Like I'm a little bit of a Peter Donnelly shill. I know I'm not his target audience at all, but I just love his stuff. And I'm not going to lie, I've taken several crisp packets home just to be like, how did you get the cow to look like the mushroom? And they all look like the same thing, but they're all different. And you have 3 colors. You're a witch or a wizard. I don't care which, you're magical. I love his stuff. And I love that I can go into Designist and see him promoted properly. And then even during COVID, he was pumping out like The President's Cat. There's Up the Mountain, I think is his most recent one or something like that. He's teaching kids about the dead zoo and stuff like that, and it's just wonderful to see his stuff. And he was on the little buses. Sorry, my Peter Donnelly rant.
Was Pat McIntyre the guy who did the buses back in the 90s?
Yeah, he was. He had Pat McIntyre creative pre-press.
First class stuff. I mean, it was just incredible. So I used to stare at buses going, that's brilliant artwork. You know, they're really interesting stuff. But that's it. Like, there's a lot of really good illustrators end up. They actually, most illustrators want to get into comics or books. I mean, that's where most want to end up, or fantasy kind of posters, that kind of stuff.
He was comics himself. But
they end up, the jobs because they pay, and end up. This is the thing about the jobs you do steer your career. And if you got a mortgage and kids, you have to kind of have stable income. So you take what you can get sometimes, and then people end up in these kind of sideline jobs, or what feel like sideline jobs for where they want to go, and then end up expressing themselves through those instead, and using those kind of skills. I remember in college thinking I want to draw dragons and spaceships and all that kind of stuff. I tell you, I have drawn more toilets than I have drawn dragons. And toilets are hard to draw. So like it's funny how your career takes you. I mean, I've done loads of a big range of stuff, but it's certainly not gone the way I expected. But I've ended up working on some really interesting projects as a result.
There's a chap named Coop who does these fantastic 50s illustrations of kind of bad girl art and devils and so forth, and he got hired. His highest paying like corporate gig was he was hired to draw illustrations for motor parts, because this was a thing they used to do in the 50s. They hired illustrators to draw the illustrations for motor parts. They put these illustrations on the boxes, and the learning thing I would take from that is that the money's everywhere. You just have to go and find it. And we've wandered all over the world of illustration, and I'm not sure if we even actually got to many of the points you wanted to, but I've enjoyed myself, and I hope though you watching at home have gotten something out of it. This has been, he leans up the notes, the art and craft of illustration. Thank you all for coming along.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
We'd have to run off to a birthday party, so I won't be able to make the Discord, but see some of you later anyway. Thanks very much.
I'll hunt you down on Twitter. All right.
Bye.